Mics are on, okay. Time, Steve.
I'd like to welcome everybody to February 13th, 2019 Public Works Committee meeting. Roll call, please.
Alderman Lockmiller.
Here.
Alderman Dimmitt.
Here.
Alderman Leahy.
Here.
And Alderman Weggie.
Here.
Move on to approval or amendment of the agenda. Are there any changes? All in favor of the agenda as it stands, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? And we'll move on. We have no announcements. We have our first of two citizen comments. Anyone from the audience like to get up and say their piece for 3 minutes? Anybody making a mad dash? So we'll move on to reports by alderman and committee chair. I have no report. Anyone else?
Nope.
Flying through this. Move on to the city administrator report. Bola.
I had asked Stephanie Carr, she is the special counsel for zoning and to planning and planning development department, to come and update the board about a new ordinance that she has been drafting that will help staff address chronic code violations. She indicates that this will be modeled after one that exists in St. Peter's. We tend to have properties in town where, for example, the property owners have interest in cultivating native plants, native garden. And I think by nature, there are a number of ways by which one could cultivate it, let it grow wild, no manicure, and then manicure. So a good example would be how Alderman Leahy and his wife Sue cultivate native gardens at their house. And Parks and Rec staff and Public Works, they've been nice enough to allow us to come visit so that we have a good model to look at when we're looking at other places in town where those property owners have native gardens. So we have, I believe, on our chronic list, we have about 5 properties throughout Brentwood. And we have heard multiple times from neighbors of these property owners. Apparently, the process we have right now is not sufficient, and it allows those property owners who have these problems to persist. It just never seems to solve itself. So Alderman Dimmitt was contacted by a resident on Moritz, who they've said that, you know, they're growing tired of this. They've had issues with dangerous, hazardous trees that were dropping limbs. And I think one of the neighbor, they would have kids and grandkids in the backyard and always run the risk that any of these, and they're huge limbs, that they could drop, and if they drop, they could cause permanent damage to whomever those limbs hit. And, you know, it breeds critters and things like that, and mosquitoes. So we have determined that taking them to court is not a solution, because you're not going to issue a warrant for the arrest of someone that typically does not show up for court. So Stephanie is drafting a better solution that will give planning and development an option, so that once that violation occurs, we would not have to continue to give 10-day notice every time to get them in compliance. The city can actually just go out there, either through Parks and Rec staff or through a third party, just abate that nuisance. And then we would, abate meaning we would mow, clear it. And then we would file a lien on that person's property. So that means then also that we need to start budgeting appropriately for things like that that comes up. Staff has been very sensitive to these property owners, trying to work with them, but right now it seems like we're trying to appease one person when there's a, you know, group of more people who seem to be upset by this. So this is our chance to bring this before you, see whether you all like the language in the ordinance, and see if any edits need to be made. So when Stephanie shows up, maybe you can ask her to speak to that during the meeting tonight.
Okay, we can jump back to that. Any questions for Bola? David?
So, Bola, the property that we're talking about that I was contacted on, some of the neighbors who live by that house talked to me last night at the Ward 1 meeting, and they were talking about some specific things I'm not sure that this ordinance would address to the extent we're talking about native grasses.
Yeah.
This was more a pile of sawdust in their backyard that had a tarp over it, and there are, for lack of a better term, there are critters that are being drawn to it.
It's all of that.
There are snakes. There are snakes going into their yard from that yard. There are logs that are accumulated in the backyard. Do we not have an ordinance in place now that would address something like that? Because this is
We do.
Because that's the property that I believe
Yeah.
the city
Yes.
entered in
Last summer.
2016 or 2017, did it?
No. So there's a different one. That one, I believe, is on Anna Lee, where the
Right, no, I know
owner.
about that one.
Yeah,
I thought we did it also on Moritz.
we did. That was. I'm now getting my years confused. It may have been 17
Okay.
or 18. I know that Shelley. Do you remember? Was it last summer where the next door neighbors came and because
2018 is when you actually
came out.
came out in
Okay, so it was last year. He had a dangerous tree that we gave him some time because he needed to earn money so that he could take the tree down. And then they took the tree down, and then we gave him more time to remove all the logs, and that's the sawdust and everything you're mentioning. So we've been very sensitive to helping them, giving them time to be financially able to do it rather than filing a lien and we taking care of it. So
Yeah, I guess my concern with that, though, is, I looked at the property, I think it was this past fall. There was I think there's a water main break, and so I went down to look. And while I was down there, one of the neighbors came out and talked to me, and they brought up that, and I remember that, oh yeah, that was the one that I'd been contacted on back in 2016. So I went into the backyard, and I looked at it, and I said, sure enough, there's a lot of stuff back there.
there is.
And that was back again, that was like in September or October of 2018. And, I will simply express to you the level of frustration that I was receiving from these folks last night as well, that, this is all well and good that we're looking at new ordinances, but, they're the ones that have to live next to it.
Yes.
And they are adamant they want to see something done about
Yes.
that. And so I guess my question is, do we have anything in place now that allows the city, do we have to go through the whole process of citing them if it's an ordinance violation, and then we have to go through the court to get a judgment, then allows the city to go onto the premises to clean up? Or is there some way to expedite that, since this has happened already with this property?
I believe that since it's happened already and we have documentation that it has been in place, we can expedite it, and Lisa's here, so she can speak to this as well. So what I'm saying is accurate. And that's exactly what we did the last time, because we had already sent him an initial letter.
Right.
And he hadn't done it. We were able to bring, our third party wasn't available to help us clear it. So instead, we had Parks come out, and I think Eric got out there and started pulling weeds and pulled poison ivy. So we now have an opportunity that it's in place.
Yeah,
we can do it.
I would just like to see something done on that sooner rather than later, because, again, if it were next to me, I would be very frustrated, because, again, it's not something that's been sitting there for only a month.
No.
It's been there for a really long time, and it's now to the point where what's happening is starting to it obviously affects the property values, but what's on their property is now going on to the
Yes.
adjacent properties
Yes.
as well.
Right.
And so I'd really like to see somebody, speed this up so
Okay.
they can get some type of
Okay.
satisfaction
Right.
from this.
So we can address that, but also this new ordinance gives us a tool.
Great.
To make it even more efficient. So,
So I can talk to you
Noted.
about this
Noted.
maybe tomorrow.
Noted.
Okay,
Yeah.
great, thank you.
This would be a good property for Mount Calvary's neighborhood
Oh.
community program.
yeah, but I think they want it addressed now rather than
Right.
in May.
That's one.
Right.
Yes.
The other half is I do believe we have the community grant program coming forward. I know that the financial stability or instability of the homeowner is a question. I don't know if cleaning up the yard and the outside maintenance would qualify, but it may not be a bad idea to approach them with, let's look at getting you on the list and getting this done. And at least that way you've solved their problem of, I need to work to get funds available to clean something. We can help with that and work it forward. And if he maintains it each year, that helps to reduce what he would back owe.
Some of the neighbors have actually offered, I think the gentleman
Yes.
that contacted you, to help mow.
Yes.
If that would help. There have been other residents where we have made them aware of the CDBG program, and they have taken no action on that, so.
Well, and again, I don't even know if it's a financial problem. Yeah, my understanding is that the person doesn't even live there.
He does not.
No,
He hasn't lived there. I've been there 7 years. He's not spent one night.
yeah.
Right.
He has.
You know, so he's not even there to.
Not there. It's a vacant house.
Yeah.
Right. And I thought we had some vacant
We
house
do.
program.
We do.
That we can.
Yes.
Again, I think it's something maybe we
we'll
can
take
talk
care of
about instead of
Right.
during this meeting, but I would like to
Sure.
see if we can address that
Okay.
property.
Is that it, Bolin?
Yes, yes. Thank you.
Okay, department reports. I think we have one from Eric giving us an update on some projects that Parks and Rec are working with.
Yeah, we just, we have a number of things we're working on in the Parks and Rec Department, and obviously we can't get them all done as quick as we like or in a month. So I just wanted to make sure I get you guys an update. Moving forward, Alderman Lockmuller asked that I put these in my weekly report. So I'll do that as well, so that way there's just roll through my weekly report, and I'll be able to give you guys update that way. The first is the dog park in Northwest Park. If you notice, it's been a little rainy and snowy, so we haven't been able to get a lot of work done. The good news is that we've been working with Clayton still. I said that they've been having trouble finding some companies to bid on the fencing work. I got notice from Patty this week, since this report's been in, I got at least one company to bid on the fencing work, so that's good. They're trying to get another one, so hopefully, weather permitting in the next week or two, we'll be able to start putting that up. As soon as the weather turns for us and it dries up, we'll be able to start prepping the site prior to the fencing company coming in, grading out a little bit. There's some scrub trees that we need to remove. So we'll be able to start getting that area ready to go. We're still confident that we'll have that open by the end of the first quarter, so we're not too concerned. It shouldn't take that long, but we're moving in a good clip, so we're not too worried about that. At Hanley Park, there's some, again, we had a rough winter, and so because of that, I don't know if you've been out there lately, the surfacing is deteriorated a little bit. So what we'd like to do is take a three-prong approach is what we're talking about. The worst part is kind of that small entrance from the gate into the large dog section. And so what we'd like to do is put some fine wood chip down there to begin with, just to get, because it is really bad, and to get you into there. We need to do that, or we can do crushed granite, one or the other. The granite's going to be a little bit more expensive. The wood chip's going to be a little bit cheaper. We can do one or the other. The crushed granite's also going to take a little bit more prep work, digging it out, putting in a little bit more of a base surface underneath. And so that's why we thought the wood chips for now would be the better way to go. At that point, we can get that done at least until the Northwest Park opens, and at which point we'd like to take a section of each side, close it down for a couple of weeks, and really try to get that part reestablished. So then, we close off the small dark section, overseed, fertilize it a second, get some grass growing there, reopen that side, close the large dog again, overseed, fertilize, get the grass growing again for a little bit. Prior to that, I've mentioned we level off the low spots so we're not continuing to hold water in that area, so at least we get that moving at the same time. While we're doing that, we have the fountain ordered, so that should be coming in, so we can bring that in, water tap, kind of do that all concurrently at the same time. So that's a recommendation to at least try to reestablish that for now. I think in the long run, if that's going to be a permanent location, if we decide that we want to keep that, we probably should look at an alternate surface like crushed granite or something else, but I think that's a conversation for a later day. At the same time, the keypad needs to be replaced. If you've been down there, I don't know if Alderman Waking talked to this. It's kind of, the keypad's kind of deteriorated in the weather condition. The contractor doesn't suggest using that type of keypad. In fact, they won't even, they'll replace it. They won't warranty it. They say that the locking mechanism outside won't hold. Typically, if you have that sort of thing, it's covered in some way with an overhang or some other way. In fact, a lot of the different dog parks we've talked to have gone away from that sort of locking mechanism. One way we could go is the gate that we're getting from Clayton has a card reader system on it with a key fob. So we're going to be having a system that has a card reader on it already. So we're going to have one system with a key fob so we can put a card reader on this gate. And that way we're consistent with both gates. And so we did get a quote for that. The quote that we received from Tech Electronics, and including the gate and 400 key fobs, which is probably a little bit too much. We don't need to go that expensive or that many key fobs. Is a little bit over $5,000. So our recommendation would be to go that route. Mount Calvary, we didn't have a chance to talk to Pastor Hankey, so we'll be moving forward with talking to Pastor Hankey here in the next month. Brentwood Days, as you guys know, all of our contracts ended last year, so the RFP for carnival rides is out, and the fireworks goes out this Sunday. And then the citywide survey, we're working on getting that RFP out. I was working on that today, so hopefully I'll have that out in the next week or two. So that is a very quick update, and we'll hopefully be able to put that, like I said, put that in our weekly report from now on.
Any questions for Eric, Andy?
If your current electronic pad does not work,
It's not electronic; it's mechanical. Yeah, instead
why
of
would
electronic.
we expect the slide card not to be adversely affected by weather?
It's not electronic. It's not a slide pad. It's basically it's kind of the same system that we have outside the city hall. So it's basically just you put your fob up next to it and it goes through. It's unfortunately they're made to be worked outside because it's basically the type of system that all doors are going to at this point. So it's made to be weather resistant.
Thank you.
Wouldn't we need 500 fobs if we're increasing the total combined membership to 500 dogs?
We are getting some of the fobs. We're getting Clayton's leftover fobs already, so they're giving us about 200. Sorry, I forgot to mention that. So they are sending us fobs already.
Would that require running electricity to the?
It does not. Unfortunately, it is a system that is self-contained. So all we have to do is we have to basically, since the parks aren't Wi-Fi accessible, we basically just have to take a computer out to the door. They work on battery packs. That's the easy answer, sorry. But since they're not Wi-Fi, you just take the computer out there, load the data straight from the computer into the battery pack, so you just have to change the battery pack every once in a while.
And everybody who has a membership now will have to come back in and get their.
We would have to change it out, but at the same right, we're going to change, they'll have to get a new key fob once the Norm West Park comes in. So if they're going to use the park at Norm West.
You know how Maplewood does theirs? Because I think theirs is an analog punch key that lasts, and it's much simpler than the one that we have.
I
'cause ours has
don't
a
for
lot of
sure. I
keys.
can ask them. I could follow up with them on that one.
I mean, I would I would be of the opinion we try the lowest cost solution here and see if that works, and just try it. And you know, if we're out a couple $100, that would maybe be easier, and then we can.
The
see.
real estate people have the lock boxes that they just hang on the doorknobs. The answer is yeah. They're outdoors and their little 3-digit code works to work with, but
I think it's a good idea to close one area, the small dog and then the big dog. I mean, if we can fix those big puddles, that would be great. And the gate between the small dog and the big dog area is falling apart too. We have
Yep.
a chair strategically there to prevent dogs running through.
Yeah, we'll be taking care of all of that.
thank you.
Thanks, Eric.
No problem.
All right, move on to our consent agenda. We've got minutes from December and January. Did anybody have any changes to those minutes?
Motion to approve both as submitted.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
One oppose. Moving on to old business. Eric, you're back up here with the sculpture on the move update.
The quick update on this was just that we had a draft, and it was a pretty serious draft. I mean, people were moving up and down. There's trades. I can't even talk about some of the things people were doing to try to move up and down in this thing. It wasn't quite that bad, but we did have the draft on Monday, and we did select Kick by Sakuna Mani. She is a local artist. I did throw out a picture of Kick, and then we were, as we went through, they basically asked if there was, an idea. They threw out the opportunity to select a second piece of work if we wanted to. I quickly ran that by Bola if we were interested in it, because she had a secondary piece that went with Kick, which is upside down, so we could put both of them together. And then I threw those both, the pictures of both of them. Some of the ideas when we looked around at this, we kind of, this Kick was the highest ranked of all the people who voted amongst the staff who looked at this. Upside Down came very close. Kind of in our first foray into the art world, it was either this or some of the pieces by Jesse Cargis. So again, the benefit of these pieces is the local artist, easy to work with. She's really interested in coming in and doing some lectures about the pieces as well if we want to. They're also about 4 to 7 feet, so they're not tremendously large. So we have lots of places we can put them. We can put them right in front of the rec center in that little sort of alcove right next to C. They'd look really nice there. Or you can put them in Memorial Park. So we have the greater versatility with these two pieces. So there's a lot of pros and cons of these couple pieces. So we're excited, and we just thought we'd pass along what they look like. And again, both pieces are different colors from both sides. So we'll be working with the artist to get these installed in the next couple months.
Sorry, go ahead.
Just remind me, Eric, do we keep these pieces for a year?
We actually have these pieces for 2 years.
Okay.
So it's a 2-year program, and at the end, then they either get transferred to somewhere else, and then we have an opportunity to draft another piece, or we can actually work with the artist to purchase them if the city would like, and then we would own them at that point.
And the idea is that they'll rotate throughout the city, or not keep them in one location the full 2 years?
We can move them from one place to another if we'd like to. We could work with her on that. But the idea is that these pieces, if we don't purchase them or someone else doesn't purchase them, they could then move to a different city as well. So they could be moved throughout the city in that program. So what the Community Creative Arts Alliance is trying to do is put together a kind of an app that you could say, hey, these are the 15 pieces throughout the St. Louis metropolitan area that you can go see, and then we would be on that app, and these two pieces would be on there.
Are we only on the hook for like installation costs for them?
We're on the hook for the $500 for each piece per year, and then we have to create the base. The other nice thing with this is, again, we have to talk with her, the concrete base. These two pieces typically don't need that concrete base, so we might not have to worry about that. These two pieces, as you see, are just put right down into the ground. So she has a metal plate underneath that she just bolts straight down. So there might not be the need for the concrete base for these two pieces particularly, but we'd have to work with her on that.
Is there how will the selection of the location be made? Is that an opportunity to open it up to a survey of the residents or something and get their input?
We can figure out how to do that.
Other questions? Thanks, Eric. Stick around because we are moving on to the other old business item, is the Lime bikes, which I guess have become dockless vehicles.
Yeah, so as you know, we last year we talked about, we attended the St. Louis Regional Dockless Bike Share presentation. And as we came to a Public Works meeting and talked about how we were working with the cities of Maplewood and Richmond Heights about trying to create our own sort of permitting process here within the three cities to get involved in that sort of process. We've kind of gone away from the bike to this sort of dockless bike share program just because, in 10 years, it might not be bikes, it might be scooters, although I'm not a big fan of scooters, but it might be some sort of other small vehicle. So you don't want to, pigeonhole yourself into just saying bikes all the time. That's why it's kind of written in a broad way. The nice thing is that by doing it, we're still being able to say yes or no to whatever the permit that comes in. So if we don't like whatever vehicle it is, we're still the ones who get to say yes or no. So as you see, it is kind of a three-city permitting, and it's determined that the city of Brentwood would be the ones who would take the permit. The maximum fleet size among the launch of would be about 100 vehicles. Maximum would be 100 vehicles, equally distributed amongst the three cities. The fleet then may expand to a maximum of 250 vehicles. If the permittee wanted to go above that, they would have to seek permission from all three cities between the permittee. So then they'd have to come back to us. They'd have to show us why there would be a need to go above 250, and then we'd have to approve it. We asked for an annual permit fee of $1,700, which is $575 per city, with additional $10 per vehicle. So if you do that, $250 would be another $2,500, if I did my math right, split amongst the three cities. So then, the cities would make a little bit of revenue off of it. The permit does include a section of right-of-way information that shows how the operators make sure their vehicles and/or stations not impede the regular flow of traffic in the public right-of-way and maintain orderly appearance, and then also how the data operator shares data with the city. So those are the most important things. I do know that Maplewood and Richmond Heights are currently reviewing the permit and sort of the permit requirements, and I think hopefully they'll be able to get us back any recommendation or changes of verbiage before we would take this to the board if we approve to move this forward to the Board of Aldermen.
Eric, would this be just one vendor, or could there possibly be more than one vendor?
No, I think the idea is that we'd leave it open for possibly more than one. I don't think we'd want to go more than one. So I'm not saying, I try not to use the word line bike, because line bike right now is the game in town in St. Louis. But let's say if a different vendor came in, I think we'd be open to a different vendor. To me, I don't want to see hundreds of bike vendors in St. Louis. Now, Seattle limits it to, what you see, the permit requirements and the permits are based primarily off of the city of St. Louis and Seattle, because Seattle seems to have a really good, robust program out there, and they do it really well. So I stole a lot of things from them, and I wish I could steal their $1 million permitting fee. And they get 4 of them, and they get all 4. So Seattle makes $4 million a year off their dockless fee. So I got a little bit of dockless bike envy from the city of Seattle right now. But the idea is that I think if we get a good vendor and they do a really good job, and we see there's a need, we could have that conversation. But I can't imagine at this time us needing more than a vendor, and that's my own personal opinion.
Then it mentions in here on page 5 having some way of having a non-app payment possibility. I mean, that's what these things revolve around, is using a phone for payment and location. And I mean, how would you do a cash? You put a coin in the thing? I mean,
that is, I think the idea is, what I've seen from most places is that you somehow have a way to pre-purchase, and pre-purchase either I don't want to call it a card or something, but you have a way to pre-purchase at a location, and then you can enter in your card, your prepaid card, into the app. That's typically what I've seen in the Seattle version and the St. Louis version. The good news is not for us to figure it out. It's the vendor who tells us how they're going to be able to do it. But that's what I've seen. It's basically been a prepaid Visa card, basically.
All right, Andy?
Page 2, Section 3, Permit Requirements. The permit allows small share vehicles and/or stations to be located primarily in the public right-of-way as well as on public property and public access private property. I believe in our own codes, we do not allow a business to operate out of public property. Now, the board made the exception for the snow cone group, but I think our code does not allow us to allow somebody to go in and form a business opportunity in on our public lands and parks. So that would have to be looked at. My dilemma here is, I understand the intent. The guy's going to have 100 bicycles and he's going to have them sitting around the city. But if he sets up stations, we've got to accommodate where he wants to put stations. I'm not so sure that we want to stay as open-ended in this. I think that needs to be discussed with your potential business entrepreneur as to what he's talking about with a station. Now, if we finish the Great River Greenway pathways and stuff and open up the parking areas so that people can come and use the pathways, that'd be a great place to put a bicycle little rental shop. And then, yes, if you don't have an app, you can rent the bike for 2 hours, ride the path, and come back and just leave the bike back at the station. But I think we need to structure how we're going to accomplish that. This leaves it open-ended, but says we've already agreed to it. And I'm not 100% sold on that.
Unfortunately, I'm looking toward Lisa and she's not here. Darn it. I think, from what I've seen, the idea is that while I understand what you're saying, I think the idea is that a lot of times they want the stations in agreed upon areas. So what you want is a ownership group like PACE to agree to let this station be placed there because you want it in areas of high traffic volume. So,
Great.
and so maybe it is a reworded statement saying, maybe it needs to be reworded somehow.
The snow cone people pay us $125 a month to have their station located at Memorial Park, and we had to rewrite the code to allow that to happen.
Sure.
Type thing. This just says we're agreeing you're going to pick out your stations and set them up, and that's where it goes. I think we need to be a little bit more conservative in that approach.
Sure.
So I don't know, I went to Memphis and saw these all over, whatever that area is, Beale Street. And it seems to be not on sidewalks, but behind sidewalks where, there's this cubicle where you can pay for it. And then there a station where you can put the bikes. So I think we can be a little bit more flexible. If the city has done it for snow cone, then surely we can
But
do it for this.
She has a contract and pays rent for establishing that business.
Right.
And we made the exception to allow a business to go in. This one says, I've paid my permit fee and I may establish stations as they determine in areas that are already defined, public property and on the right-of-ways, which we've given up our rights as to exactly what's happening there. I think we need to,
I think we can work this out in
Work-
theory if we think that this concept is good.
But note that we have to approve every location of a station.
it doesn't say that.
Yeah, it says in coordination with the city.
In writing, and so we would be approving where they go.
Can you point me where that is?
Right there.
I'm on page 2, section 3. Where are you? I
Somewhere in
missed,
here, it says that it's approved by the city in writing.
Turn the size.
I missed that. I apologize. But as a good beginning, I'm not opposed to where you're headed.
3.01,
It's
permit
in, it's that
allows.
next session, or, let me see.
Yeah, the
and-
cities must approve the location of every station in the system within city limits in writing, and the vehicle share operator must work with the cities to identify the desired areas and station spacing for implementation phase.
Where
So
are
that
you
is,
reading, Brendan?
It's under the section
Right-of-way.
called right-of-way, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the 6th bullet.
Gotcha. I see where you're reading. Okay. Thank you. I did not catch that. I apologize. Thank you.
Any more questions for Eric? I guess, Eric, you need a motion to forward this onto the board, or?
Yes.
So moved.
Second. Go ahead.
Got all that, Shelley? All right, I guess just all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thanks, Eric. Move on to new business. Dan, we're going to be talking about stormwater discharge into the right-of-way.
It's up a little bit. Yeah, I don't know if you had any specific questions. What I tried to do is outline there's two different problems, but both of these problems are tied to the same issue, which would be discharge into this right-of-way. So Public Works, had been contacted before by a particular property owner on St. Clair, and in that instance, this goes back a few years, but there were those storm tech chambers that were put in, and for anyone that wanted more information, I tried to put the make and model and everything within the board docs, but we actually put one of the actual units out in the fire base, so if you'd want to see it afterwards, we can always take a look at it. I know Alderman Dimmitt already looked at it, but basically they're just a half-moon shape of polyethylene plastic. They have end caps. You overdig, you put down some fabric, put rock, put this unit in, and it was supposed to take like either a drain for a sump or a drain for, downspouts, gutters, and put them in there. It is a recommended use for low-impact development. So basically, it's almost like a cistern. It's creating an area for the water to go and then slowly dissipate. The problem with this particular one versus the other ones that were put in is that it's under capacity. Or I guess it's actually over capacity in the sense that there's too much water going into it and it has nowhere to go but out. So when it drains out of this area, it actually goes, the slope of the terrain goes towards his neighbor to the north, and it congregates around his driveway apron and it can freeze. And same thing with the sidewalk slab. In these other instances, when it got really cold, there's several areas, I know we listed those in the memo, but there's probably 14 or more locations, and we haven't even looked at every single one. We're continuing to look at these to see if there's issues with more properties. What we plan on doing is identifying these and figuring out what is the cause. Is it a sump? Is it downspouts and gutters? It could be both. I know in the instance with St. Clair, the gentleman's sump is connected to the same pipe that also has the north elevation of the gutter system. So there's way too much in that little area. It can hold a little over 300 gallons, and if it rains significantly and the ground's already saturated, there's nowhere for it to go. But the main problem that we've seen in the other instances would be that the water continues to pump out. It's cold. It just keeps freezing and building up layers. So in some instances, we included some photos, and I've got way more photos in here, but it could kick out, 6 or 8 feet from the gutter, and then we have to go through there with Public Works trucks, backhoe, skid steer, break the ice up, put salt down. But as long as the pump keeps cycling, which it does, it dilutes and eventually washes away the salt. So it's kind of a no-win, but we just keep going out there periodically throughout the week. The bigger issue is on weekends, because then it's, of course, an overtime situation, unless we're already scheduled to be on storm duty, which we were in some instances. We would break up the crews just so we would not have everybody on overtime. But again, there's a SC310 model that's out there. We met with ADS, which is the company that manufactured StormTech. They said, well, what you have there is undersized. You really need to go to a model 3500 or bigger. The other option that we can look at, which we are looking at, is to extend the pipe from that property to the north so that we connect it near White, where there's an existing curb inlet. But that requires us to do sealed drawings, send those to MSD. The drawings get reviewed. If they approve it, then we can go to the next phase, which would be construction. So, but that would be, you would never have an issue there with capacity because it's going through a 12-inch pipe and feeding right into the storm sewer.
Dan, when I was looking at these things, one of the concerns I have, no matter what we put in there, a lot of them require to have, let's put this, if you ever cleaned out your gutter, you see
Right.
what junk you pull out of there. That all flows into these chambers. A lot of these chamber companies, I saw you're really supposed to maintain these things
Right.
with a settlement pit and clean them out periodically.
These weren't that
I know
that
they're
option,
not
yeah.
that kind. But that's my worry. If we keep replacing these, then we have to maintain them. I mean, I would like to see more of I know
That
they're
option,
not
yeah.
that kind. Permanent. But that's my worry. If we keep replacing these, is that what I sound like? Wow. So I'll let everybody else discuss, but I would be wanting to look at something that's no longer our responsibility, would drain this properly and don't require ongoing maintenance. David?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dan, first of all, thanks for getting this information together. Secondly, I was Saturday, I walked down to somebody's house on Stratford, to look at drainage issues that they're dealing with. There's that alley, I think, in the back, and at some point, I need to talk to you about that. But on my way down there, I noticed that 9101 Moritz, there's a sidewalk that runs adjacent to high school, and it was completely covered with a sheet of ice. And so, you had to walk out onto high school to avoid that. So I don't know if that's on your list or not, 9101 Moritz, but it was.
Yeah, there's a lot on Moritz.
Yeah, and this is on the west side of high school as opposed to the east side. But as to these storm tech chambers or whatever you want to call them, you can, I don't know, for lack of a better term, you can chain them together, link them
Yes.
together.
Yes.
Is that right? Now, where would the physical placement of these, would they be on private property or are they in the right of way?
Yeah, and that's the trick. If we were to go with that larger size, the MC 3500, it's so large, it's like over 9 feet in length. There's not enough green space on public right-of-way, ours, that it would kick out into the private property. So you'd have to develop an easement or something if you were to try to put it on both properties. I know in St. Clair, they agreed in theory that if you were to go with that route, they'd be willing to allow that. And because we weren't sure about MSD, it's like, well, MSD could say, absolutely not, you can't connect this. And if we built it to their standards, they would own and maintain it. I forgot to mention that, but MSD, if you submit the plans, they approve it, we construct it, they'll eventually roll it into their system and forever maintain it, which is actually a good thing.
Is that different from the storm tech or is that?
It's totally different. It would be a 12-inch PVC pipe that would match and mirror their specifications.
That
and their
runs
current
underneath
system.
the sidewalk or?
Yeah, we looked at it and we think we could squeeze it in that tree lawn, like either
Okay.
under the sidewalk or right along the curb. The trick with it is that you'll probably wind up cutting some tree roots too, which is something we didn't look forward to. And that's why we thought, well, do you just keep it isolated, just put in a bigger storm tech so that you're not impacting our trees, public trees.
And then there'd be T connectors along the way that.
Right, so if
the
there's other
homeowner could
issues,
detach
or
to?
if the house ever gets sold and upsized, like this one's fairly large compared to some of the other ones, so if for whatever reason that person needed to connect, they can't discharge into the street. That's in violation of our municipal code. So if they're going to follow municipal code 220, then the suggestion was we put in a T at those properties and then they could just connect on in.
Now, remind me on this, the MSD, they were going around disconnecting the downspouts, right? So it could not go into the storm.
Right, because right now they're combined,
Right.
their sanitary and their storm is combined, and that's all part of Project Clear is to separate the two. So you're right, they've done smoke testing where they put a fan and smoke and push it through the line. If it comes out through the gutter, then they know that they've got an illegal connection.
Okay.
That downspout and gutter system ties in where it shouldn't.
Okay.
And they, to your point, they'll send a letter to the property owner. They do all the corrective action. The property owner doesn't have to do anything.
But we do have some properties, like you said, where the storm tech would not work. The one on
Right.
Park Ridge that we looked at. What can we do about that? Is there anything the city can do, or we just make it the homeowner's problem? Say you've got a code violation, you need to somehow figure out how to get that to drain somewhere other than on your neighbor's driveway.
Well, I know, like, in the, towards the tail end, we kind of put the opinion of the city attorney. First, we would have to send a written notification about the problems that they're creating and the violation that they're actually triggering. And then we would have to try to work with them to figure out a solution. So each instance might be slightly different. Some might be storm tech, some might be within, 20 feet of an inlet, and that's an easy solution there. But yeah, we would need to figure out what those costs are, and then also how does the person afford it? In some instances, it might be just a few thousand, which, doesn't seem like a lot, but it is a lot if you're on a very tight budget. So one of the things that we talked about would be like a neighborhood improvement district, or somehow work out the financing so that we could get it done up front, but then the person would reimburse us over time.
Okay, thank you.
Brandon?
I mean, I see this all over the place too. I mean, most of these houses have been bought and sold tons of times with this condition. So, if I just recently bought a house, I would be quite surprised to find out it's in, code violation.
Yeah, and some of them you'll notice there's a knockout in the curb where it's been there for years, because you can
Forever.
see an old
Yeah.
iron fitting that's in the curb. And, that was prior to the code, I'm sure it was allowed. But some of the new construction, that's the ones that should definitely, as they're being vetted through planning and development,
Right, we need to.
they shouldn't be allowed whatsoever.
I mean, it seems like, but it would have to be almost the residents paying for it or some of it, because this goes to the whole city paying for private property.
Right.
The city attorney, and the word he used was public purpose.
Right.
And the fact that, so there's two issues. One is the sump pump draining on the city sidewalk and the street. There's one liability there. We need to make them aware of it. So he's supposed to be helping us draft a letter that we'll be sending out to put them on notice. And then there's the secondary liability because it's our public street. And if someone were to get injured, they'd go after everybody. So, because it's a public purpose and they've done an improvement, I think is what he said, to their property that has now created a liability on the city's property. So make them aware, find out what the cost is. We clearly know not everyone's going to be able to pay for it, hence the NID. And I think he said, was it 25 years that they have? What was the year?
It's either 20 or
20 or
25.
25 that
Yeah.
they have to pay it off. So if it's $2,000, I mean, the board could say we want to shrink it, not 25 years, to something less. But yeah, it's a problem all over the city, and now would be a good time to try to get a handle on it.
And for new construction, or if you have a house that it's not new construction, but they do want to install a sump pump, do we have anything in place, permitting required, so that we don't have, so they're draining properly?
We need to pay a little bit more attention to that. We do.
Because it sounds like you've done a great job, you and Dan working together, coming up with this list.
Yeah.
But it sounds like that was really the problem, is that we
Right.
had a number of these sump pumps that were
Right.
installed for years, and they weren't being drained properly.
Right.
And now we've got these things and probably 9 months out of the year, it's not an issue, but with the winter that we've had, it's incredibly dangerous. Like I said, we have one person that cannot literally get into their driveway because of their neighbor's discharge.
Yeah, we've had mild winters where it didn't become evident until, you had
Right.
-5 and 0 and 10, for days on end. And then you see it and it just keeps ebbing. It's no different than like water main breaks and stuff. If left unchecked, they'll just keep accumulating like paper mache.
But
So I think some of the staff members in Public Works who've worked for the city for 20-plus years, they're telling us that they're even seeing new houses that have these problems. So that's a red flag that
Right.
public planning development needs to start checking this as well.
make sure that when the construction goes in, right, that it's complying with whatever code there is. Okay, thank you.
Brandon?
One more just quick. If we do that 25-year and it's an assessment thing, does that go on the property itself? Is that kind of like a PACE financing thing? Is
Case
that
financing.
where it's on
Yes.
the property,
Yes.
not on
It
the?
goes
would
with the
be-
property.
It goes with the property,
Right.
yes.
Right.
Yeah, but is it paid off through the tax payment annually, or is it
Don't
just a lien
remember
that sits
that.
there until?
Do you remember
I don't know,
that?
we didn't, yeah.
I don't
we didn't get
remember
into
that.
Under current county arrangements, the city would be reimbursed each year for its portion of the repay back. It sits as a lien. Used to be, the lien only got paid when the property turned
So-
over.
so this is
They
a little
changed it-
different.
They changed it to the point that it becomes a yearly. But you had the house on High School Drive also.
Yeah, there is,
I
that's why I
think
said
there's
this is,
two of them side by side.
yeah, there's a
on the-
25-29 high
Thank
school,
you.
I know
You
on
got
here.
'em.
Yeah, it's on here.
Yeah, and as I said, we've told people, or I've told my public works guys, as you're driving around, if you notice anything that isn't on this list, because we gave them a copy, is like just jot it down so that we can kind of keep a running total. Because I said, some of them I don't think are issues because of the slope, whether it's like Melvin or Porter, those all drain positively, but it's these ones that are on flatter terrain that have these discharges, and then all of a sudden it becomes a big problem because there's like 6 feet of lane that you can't use because it's iced over.
Yeah, but a majority are in your ward.
Yep.
I mean,
Unfortunately.
what we're trying to do here is give Dan some direction on where to go. If a sump pump is discharging onto a driveway and it's causing this issue, that's really not the city's problem.
No.
So our direction here is to notify the homeowner that they need to maintain this free of ice.
Well, I think yes and no. I would agree with you that it's not the city's problem. until it affects the city's property. If it comes over and it blocks the sidewalk or it blocks the city, then it certainly does become a problem. But even if it just drains onto the driveway, private property, is that still an ordinance violation, Bola? Do you know? Yes. Okay, so under those circumstances, the affected homeowner would, I guess, contact somebody to try and get the wheels rolling that there's an ordinance violation and do it that way. But as for these other things, I guess what I'm saying is it sounds like you've got a handle on it, whether it's this, continue to look at the 12-inch, installation of the 12-inch pipe underneath the sidewalk or in the tree lawn, or these storm tech devices. Because even if it doesn't affect the city, the homeowner might be able to take advantage of one of those solutions.
Right, yeah, because the little storm tech's, just the material was like $250, but that didn't include the rock and the fabric. So I mean, it might be $1,000 solution with labor. It might be a little bit more than that. But the pipe, I know, would be an expensive solution in the instance of St. Clair, but
Right.
it takes it to the inlet, and you don't have to worry about, the way we were talking about having to do maintenance. They do actually make an inspection portal similar to like a septic tank, where there'll be a riser and a clean-out cap. So if you did want to see it, if it's filling up or is there debris in there, then you can remove the cap and poke a camera down in there.
Well, I'm not directing you to, obviously, but it would be interesting to see what the cost would be for installing that, so, Mr. Chair, I would like to see that. What locations, what proposed locations do you think you would need that? Because I think when we talked about before, you don't think it'd be on both sides of the street, it would just be one side of the.
Right. Yeah, and in some instances, we know, that's why we thought we'd just put together a comprehensive list.
Great.
As it grows, we'll put solutions in there and costs. And then some of those, I know it's just a matter of where the downspout and that elbow turns, it kicks out onto their driveway, and the driveway just sheet flows down the driveway and into the street. It's like, well, if you put a diffuser or corrugated plastic pipe and somehow send it into your yard, that problem may go away. It might be a simple Home Depot fix where it's, $100.
Okay.
Anything else on that subject? All right, dance to ground, because we're moving on to an optional sanitation service discount for senior citizens and the disabled. What you got for us on that subject?
Yes. If you recall, the Resolution 1127, it kicked in January 1 of this year. Basically, the optional services, all of those increased. In particular, I was asked by a resident, he has or had rear yard trash collections, and it went from $9 to $23. And he said that, he can't do it himself. He's physically unable. He's used his grandson to do it. And is there a discount for either a veteran, he's a World War II veteran, or just a senior citizen discount? I said, no, not at this time, but I can bring it to the committee. Committee can bring it to the board, so that's why we're discussing it now. I looked at our comparators, and there's not a whole lot out there that offer a discount whatsoever for seniors or disabled. The ones I was able to find, like Webster Groves, they have a 10% senior discount. Basically, you have to prove you're 65 years of age or older, and you can qualify for that 10% discount on sanitation. University City, a little bit more generous at 15%, again, 65 years of age, but the trade-off there is you have to trade down to a 60-gallon capacity trash can from, I believe they use 95 down to a 60, because in their minds, typically, empty nesters in that age bracket produce less trash, so they're going to give you the smaller cart. And then lastly, O'Fallon, Missouri, they have 15%, 65 or older, but they also allow a discount for disabled, if you can prove, some medical hardship where you can't do it. Bring in, I don't know if it's some sort of doctor's report or something saying why you can't do it, then they grant that permission that you can get the 15% discount. So is to give you some information, see if you would be willing to change it. It doesn't affect monetarily, a whole lot, because there's only like 15 York Village people that now use the carryouts and another 15 or so that use the other optional services. So at most it's 30 people, but I don't know if everyone's 65 or older, disabled. I have no idea what that is, but we looked at worst case, well, what if it's 25,
How many inquiries? Just the one so far you've had?
Just that one person, because he said he's on a very fixed income because he's almost 100.
Andy?
I'm sorry, I understand the homeowner's plight, but the whole intent of us raising the fee was to discourage the arrangement. If we start giving ways to work it back in, I'm anticipating the owner's coming back, then we should have made the fee $50 and we'll give you a 5% discount type thing. No, I think that this is a problem that the homeowner has to address, and it's a uniform fee across the board for everybody in the city.
David?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I respect the comments of Alderman Lay, but I have to disagree with him. You know, the amount of money that we're talking about, and I do understand what you're talking about, the concern that you get on that slippery slope and you start making exceptions, and then there really is no longer a rule because there are too many exceptions. However, you know, like you said, it looks like we have 25 folks.
Monetarily, you know, a whole lot because.
So it looks like we're talking about 25 folks. The estimate is that would fall into that demographic in 2019.
Yeah, and I looked at our overall population, and I know that, you know, we're a little over 8,000 residents, and the age demographic 65 or older is around 11%. You know, it's 902.
Right.
You know, I know that baby boomers are going to be, you know, pushing that up higher, but, you know.
I guess what I'm getting to is I'd like to see even more of a discount, quite frankly. Yeah, because at 10% it's $2.30 a month, and this is a gentleman who's 99 years old. He's a World War II vet. You know, he served this country, and he was a colonel, I believe, and he has to use a walker.
Yes.
And you know, to get his trash can out to the street, he lives by himself, and this idea that I don't want him doing that. I don't want him trying that. I know we have other residents who are in the same boat. Trying to get their trash can out to the curb. And I think this is one of the reasons, that's one of the things that separates Brentwood from other communities, is that we can provide this level of service to our residents. And if we can't do this for folks who have served this country, then, you know, I feel sorry for this city. And I'd like to think that we can find the money. It's not a money issue. You know, I think we can come up with some type of a workable line schedule, whatever we want to do, whether it's a combination of somebody being disabled and a certain age, because it's not limited to somebody a certain age. Somebody might have a disability. I'm not talking about a hearing disability, but I'm talking about a mobility disability that precludes them or makes it very difficult for them to get their trash out to the curb. And we're telling them, sorry, we're not going to make an exception for you. So I'd like to see us go even further. I'd like to see us go back to the $9 for those folks who fall into that very small segment. And again, might be a double. It might be a senior citizen, and they have some type of a mobility issue. But I would like to see staff go back and work on it even further.
Brandon, did you have something?
Yeah, well, I agree. I was going to make a motion to send something forward, but if you want to be more aggressive, then I'll second that motion. Yeah, I think our older citizens are under a lot of pressure, right? The appraisements are going up on all the houses. You know, the fixed income. There's a lot of screws being turned right now, and this seems like a low cost way to accommodate a little bit.
Yeah.
Do you just want to make a motion and we get this
The
done
motion
right
to
here?
0. How about that?
To 0.
Yeah, not charge them. If they fall within that category you
That would
just
be a lot
mentioned.
more people doing it.
Sorry.
I don't want to encourage.
Why don't we do 15%?
We should have
Or do you want to take it back to?
I'd like to take it back even more, because 15% would be, what, $3?
Right. Yeah, I looked at it too, and I was like, well, I know talking to O'Fallon, they said they did a comprehensive search, and like 15's usually the highest, but they're like, they were one of the highest, and they're like, well, for them, it made more of an impact because theirs is already more expensive. You know, they charge everybody, I think it's either $40 or $50 a month. You know, in our case, you know, maybe 25%, maybe like you're saying, go back, and you could just make a form where they would either check off either disabled, senior citizen, and have to prove it.
Or how about both? Again, because it's, you know, somebody who's 65 years old, I don't consider them in the same category as somebody who physically can't get their trash can to the curb.
Right, because you could be 39 and physically unable, and you would just check off the disabled box and then say, well,
That's
this is why I
exactly
can't do it.
I know a lot of folks that are 72 years old, and they're more mobile than I am. You know, so.
And some may opt to not have
I
the
know a-
discount.
I know a 36-year-old that is not as capable.
Right.
I understand that.
Right, and that's what I'm saying. I don't want to limit it to the age. I guess I'm looking more
Right.
there of the disability than anything else. And I don't want to make it so broad that if you're quote disabled, we'll provide this service for you at $9 a month, because disability is very, very broad. I would want to make it very limited for people who do not have the ability to pull the trash out to the curb.
Okay.
Mr. Dimmitt, when you talk about these people, I too am not cold-hearted. My dilemma is when you have this person for a disability, is that the only person in the household, and thus that household qualifies it? Or is it just one person of the 4 people in the household, and they use that to ask, and the other 3 people we don't consider, who might be younger, who might have the ability to do this type thing? I mean, here comes the lady that says, I'm disabled, but I have 2 kids, and the kids are doing the chores, and yeah, getting the trash can to the street is the chore, but I don't have to do that because the city will give me a discount. You get into people playing games. The intent here was to get the service consistent throughout the city. That's where I'd like to keep it. That's why I'm not a feeling for the individual, but you can open up that slippery slope.
Well, sure you can. I guess my response to that would be, we can come up with something like that for every possible. We can come up with a scenario that would fit that, Alderman Leahy. We do this the state does it for automobiles. You're allowed to have to park in a handicapped parking spot. You might have other people in the house that are perfectly able to drive, but that doesn't preclude them from being able to park in that parking spot. I really do think that the likelihood of this blowing up and we have people who are abusing this service that we have is pretty slim when you put that up against the potential benefits of helping out some residents. So you might have a couple of households where somebody thinks, I'm going to get grandma to come move in with me so I can get this reduced price on this rear yard trash pickup. Again, I think it's something that I'm willing to run the risk on that, I guess is what I'm saying. So it's an excellent point, but I don't have a problem with going forward with it.
So I would make a motion then, why don't we take to the board a 50% reduction, which brings it basically within $30 of what it was before, for anybody over 65 and anybody who can prove a disability, or whatever how Webster's doing it or each city's doing it.
Yeah, again, I would like to limit the disability though, because if it's the disability if it's a hearing loss, if that qualifies as a disability, I'm not sure that they need that help. You see what I'm saying? I want to focus more on mobility than anything else.
Somebody that might be blind or...
Right. Somebody who has to use a walker to get the trash. I don't
So-
want them
so
trying to take
one of
it
the
up.
cities said that they, you had to prove a doctor's note or something that said they had limited mobility.
There you go.
All right?
Right.
Right. Your physician would say, this is why this person cannot do
you
this
go.
task you're asking them to do.
There we go. If we can get a doctor's note from somebody like that, throw that into your motion. Second it.
So motion.
All right. Well,
That was so clean.
Okay.
any other discussion? Nope. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Opposed.
All right. Thanks. Does that
Thank
help
you,
you out,
Dan.
Dan?
Okay.
So you know what to take to the board?
Right. And I guess, would there be time for the next one? Okay. I didn't know if you, okay.
It's Tuesday's meeting.
So would that be like a resolution since it's just a policy thing? So we can do it all in one meeting? Okay.
Consent agenda.
Move on to citizen comment. Anybody out there want to state their piece for 3 minutes? I don't see anybody.
Motion to adjourn.
Have a second? Motion together?
Second, sorry.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right.
Thank you.